What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. I'm here with Dodd Caldwell of MoonClerk. And before I formally introduce you, Dodd, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out. And people should check out, and we'll get a little bit into this, Rob Walling, episodes with Rob Walling. He hosts the conference MicroConf, which I know Dodd has spoken at, which is for bootstrapped SaaS companies. Check it out. He started Get Drip, and just an amazing entrepreneur and person. Check it out. Founder of Zapier, Wade Foster. Check that one out. Check out the founder of AWeber. Also, they've been doing email marketing, I think, since, I don't know, like 98 or something, Dad. And Kevin McArdle, who gives bootstrap businesses, SaaS founders, their dream exit. I was talking before we hit record. I was like, there's an episode, Dad, I think he should purchase you one day. You're like, well, we're not for sale. I'm like, no worries, but Kevin, if you're listening, just keep an eye on Dad. Maybe 10 years from now when he's ready, you guys could strike a deal. That and many more on InspiredInsider.com. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. At Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships. And we do that by helping you run your podcast. For me, Dad, I found no better way to give to my relationships over the past decade, to have them on my podcast, to profile them, the companies and the people I love and admire. And I love MoonClerk. We use MoonClerk actually. And I'm like, why haven't I had on Dodd on the podcast yet? I love what they're doing, and let's tell more people about it. So if you've thought of podcasting, if you're a business, I believe every business should. I've been saying this for over a decade. If you've thought about it, do it. If you have questions, you can go to rise25.com, email us. Happy to answer any questions that you have. And today's guest, Dodd Caldwell, is the co-founder of MoonClerk. Like I said, MoonClerk's a web-based software company that helps businesses accept one-time and recurring payments online without any coding. So if you're out there thinking, and we'll go a little bit deeper on this, what's like one of the most important things, if not the lifeblood of any business, which is money? And how do you get paid? How do you accept payments easily? How do you make it easy for people to pay you, right? I mean, I love when people make it easy for me to pay them as a customer. And I love actually when they put me on recurring payments. So I don't have to worry about it. And it just comes out. And so your clients, if you use Stripe, there's a more elegant, better solution that gives you more control. And I suggest everyone, I told you this before, Dad, that I suggest everyone use MoonClerk for their business, especially if, we're an agency. If you're an agency out there, I know you have consulting companies, coaches, there's so many use cases for it. He also runs Rice Bowls, which is a creative nonprofit that partners with grassroots orphanages in 8 countries to feed hungry children, and previously founded an e-commerce company, which he sold, and led an international chain sales efforts for his family's manufacturing business. So, Dodd, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for being a great customer as well.
Yeah. So why did you start MoonClerk?
Well, it started out of another failed startup. Actually, I was working. I know the nonprofit world fairly well. I'm volunteer president of Rice Bowls, as you mentioned, and I was actually, this is kind of pre-Squarespace days and easy CMS and things like that. And I was trying to start, and I did start a company that helped nonprofits create kind of like instant low maintenance websites. And this was, again, kind of early days of, website builders and all that. And actually my business partner, Ryan Wood in MoonClerk, who is our CTO, he was actually contracting with me and kind of ended up kind of leading the development work on that. That business failed. But kind of one of the bright spots of that failure was that the one thing that kind of works that people liked, these nonprofits liked, was we had integrated in recurring donations. And then the business, I think the max I ever made was enough to maybe go to Chipotle once a month, take the team to Chipotle once a month with that. And so it didn't last very long. It's kind of hard to sustain that when you're bootstrapped. But that kind of gave, gave the idea of, okay, wait a second. What if, if nonprofits are kind of struggling with this, and again, this is a while back, 9 years ago, if they're struggling with how to accept recurring donations, my guess is there are other small businesses who would like to accept recurring payments who are maybe having trouble automating that. And actually at the time, we're built on top of Stripe. And at the time, I think Stripe was like 10 people, 12 people, person startup.
Wow.
Like, it was like that, unless you were like really deep into the payment space, you had not heard of them or anything like that. And I mean, early days, I think, they're probably now worth hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, kind of most recent valuations and what they'll IPO at and everything. But I mean, the founders were doing our customer support, back then, the Collison brothers. And at the time you had to be a developer to be able to implement recurring payments and still use pretty expensive software and still go get like a payment gateway at your bank, go down, get, merchant account and all that. Or you had to use PayPal, and PayPal's system was not really built for businesses to accept recurring payments. It was, a peer-to-peer type. That was what it was originally built for, peer-to-peer payment. So
there are other issues with, business. I mean, some businesses do use PayPal, but there's other issues I've heard with account freezes and other things with PayPal. So I take that back with Kevin McArdle. You should just have Stripe purchase you.
I don't know. I think we're
hey,
small.
Patrick, I think you should acquire us because we have these features.
I think we enjoy what we do, and I think we're. I
don't know why I'm trying to sell off your company, but
I know.
I'm just brainstorming on this call. I'm thinking, wow, Stripe should look into MoonClerk. Why? So talk for a second, Dodd, about why, if someone's like, well, I already use Stripe, why use MoonClerk as well? What do you tell people?
Sure. Well, I mean, just like I said, PayPal was originally built for peer-to-peer, person-to-person. Stripe was originally built for developers. And they absolutely, I mean, it sounds weird, as it kind of happens sometimes when you have vendors or whatever that kind of become slight competitors. So, I mean, there definitely is a certain aspect of that, of now they offer more features that did not used to exist. You literally had to be a developer 100% to use them in the past. But we also have, over time, added we have a lot of value add on top of what Stripe does. Heavy integrations in with MailChimp, digital delivery system. We have like a form builder where you gather data, and then we have a pretty robust email notification system to the account as well as to the person paying. And you can populate those emails with like data from the checkout, including the form builder and custom information that you're getting. And I would say maybe two other, like a couple, I mean, there's more than that, but just a couple other like big picture things. I think it's easier to use for non-technical people. I mean, we literally built this from the ground up, from day one, for people who are not developers and not technical. And we've intentionally kept features out that Stripe has so as not to confuse. And then I also think we're a small business. And so I believe we provide great support for individual our customers are small businesses, whereas Stripe is a huge company now and probably doesn't provide the type of support that we do for non-technical users, given that their bread and butter is dealing with developers, and also they do have small businesses, but a lot of large businesses as well. So I would like to think that we provide a certain personalized level of support, which I think a lot of small businesses care about. Because
I'll say from my
their livelihood.
standpoint, Dad, what I like, I tell people you should switch, or not switch, but like get it, because one, email notifications you mentioned. It's funny because with Stripe, and if a payment fails, it will send some kind of message to the person. It does not send to the business through Stripe. You cannot get a notification. And that alone is worth getting, MoonClerk, in my opinion. Getting an actual notification from you or from MoonClerk, or that the payment didn't go through.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy, right? And then the other thing is the ACH. Like we're all any business that it's like we were talking before we hit record, like the non-sexy stuff, like the payment processing space is not a sexy space unless you actually have a business, which is very sexy because you need to get paid, and then you realize these little fees add up. Mm-hmm. So I know you can use ACH and do a recurring ACH through MoonClerk. So if you don't want to pay the processing fees, you can actually set a recurring payment through ACH with MoonClerk as well. Or if you're using Stripe natively, you maybe have to be some kind of genius coder to do that somehow. So
yeah, I think you also, when you do it with natively, you would have to probably, I think, do your own custom coding. And they also use what are called micro deposits, which is where your customer would have to come back in, check their bank account, come back in 3 days later.
They deposit like 17 cents. And
all that. Whereas ours is like automated. Basically, use your online banking credentials, and it's automatically approved. Yeah.
So those two features for me is what I tell people. And I don't get anything, by the way, when people sign up for MoonClerk, but I just to be a nice person to them, I think it benefits them to do that just on those two features alone. And so I'd love to talk about, microcomp for a second and what you learned, and you made a conscious decision, I think early on, to bootstrap the company as opposed to taking funding. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, and maybe some of the kind of roll into the conversation of some of the things you've learned from your other peers at Microcomp or wherever who are also bootstrapped. So why Bootstrap?
Sure. Yeah. Ryan, my business partner, and I, when we were like kind of setting out to build this, we didn't really even have the desire to build like a unicorn $1 billion startup. The goal was to have a profitable, self-sustaining business that provides for our families, like a work environment, small team work environment that we enjoy working in, a product that we enjoy working with. And we like solving problems and other people's problems. And that was like one of the things that was like, oh, this is actually like a legit thing that small businesses like have a problem with, and we can help solve it. And that's kind of fun, and it feels rewarding. And so we didn't really set out to have that unicorn status. I think, there's all different ways. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. There's all different ways of looking at it. I believe it is even though it's still not a high probability of success of starting any business, but there's a higher probability if you're trying to start just a small, profitable business than trying to be $1 billion startup. You also can kind of control your own company versus having a board and investors. That's an advantage. Live a little bit more sane lifestyle where you're not like killing yourself, working 24/7. And I have some some theories around that and how teams should work from a speed standpoint and effort standpoint. But those are kind of the businesses. So, that was kind of why going bootstrapped was right. It's not right for everybody, but it was right for us.
One of the things that you talked about at MicroConf when you spoke was about raising prices. And I know that every company, whether it doesn't matter whether you are a SaaS company, service company, kind of struggles with maybe with the mindset of raising prices on a lot of different levels. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on raising prices, whether it's your SaaS company or someone else listening to this.
Do it.
Okay.
That's my advice. No, obviously you have to be providing value and have something that people want and are willing to exchange their money for in order for it to work. But I do think, and we may underprice our product. I have found that we haven't seen, we've really only raised our prices like twice, one of those being fairly recently. And some of it was like literally our own costs had increased, and it was like, okay, we've got to like offset. There were different things we just kind of like needed to offset. But it had been years since we had raised our prices. I think overall, you try to make an educated decision. Obviously, we started at, our prices just recently raised from it doesn't sound like much, but for our lowest tier, went from $15 to $18. Other tiers went up as well, but not by like a great percentage. And it's still scary, even going up like $3. Now, I think there is a big difference. Okay, if you decide to go from starting off at $15 to starting off at $300, you're going to be attracting a completely different market. I mean, you're basically changing the market you're in. So we weren't necessarily doing that. But we found generally, if people are really upset by those pricing changes, like from 15 to 18 or whatever, and I don't mean this in a bad way, they probably weren't going to be good customers anyway. And you would rather, I don't want to, I think there's a healthy medium of, I don't want to have a business where I have two customers that make up 100% of my revenue. I like having a diversified stream of a lot of different customers, but at the same time, for instance, you would rather have, if you're doing 100 million in revenue, which we're not, you would probably, I don't know if you want to have 100 million $1 customers. You'd probably like to have some larger, because that's 100 million people you're doing customer support for that are, potential bugs, all that. So there's a healthy medium there. And even if, in raising your prices, you lose some customers, if your revenue per customer is increasing in your top line, I don't necessarily think that's the worst thing in the world to lose kind of maybe net customer count, if you will. But you probably won't do that even, as long as you're not like doing some kind of crazy price increase.
So how do you communicate that? So you mentioned, okay, we're going to raise prices. All right. You make the decision across the board. And I guess some people will, again, we're not talking like huge increase or anything, but I know some people will just increase it across the board. Some companies may grandfather people in. So there's that. But let's say you're just going to go across the board. We're going to increase everyone. How do you decide what's scary to you as a business owner? And then how do you communicate that to the customers?
So we've done both. The first time we raised our prices, we grandfathered people in, and, it took much longer for that to have any type of material effect on our business. And in this time, most recently, in 2021, when we raised our prices, we did do it across the board for even existing customers. And some of that was like our prices were increasing like behind the scenes. And so it was to offset that, and it wasn't going to have a material impact unless we did that. But we also were like, we provide a lot more value than we did X number of years ago. So we didn't feel bad about it necessarily. We also communicated it well ahead of time. I can't remember if it was 60 or 90 days. So giving people a heads up, and I think I put in there like, hey, if if you want to move away from us or whatever, that you have plenty of time. We're not holding your data hostage, anything like that. We sent a reminder of, maybe 30 days out of, hey, here, this pricing change is happening. So we didn't want to like hide it from customers, surprise it. You want to give people time to digest and move away if they decide that you're not the right solution for them anymore. I mean, you don't want to like control people. Nobody likes that. So we did that, but we were also, we let people know our prices had increased, and that was one thing, but we also let them know about some things that we had done that kept them from having price increases with Stripe. And because Stripe has changed up their billing model, and we've decided, hey, we're going to absorb some of that for you, so you're not incurring these other expenses. And I think people are really understanding. I think I got like 1 or 2 like thank you emails, which is not what you would expect, or thank you tweets. I can't remember, maybe a thank you email, a thank you tweet, and of people thanking them. Hey, you guys have provided a great product and it's been working for us for a number of years. This is a totally reasonable like cost increase. So that's
what I'm hearing, Dad, is like it's really important to not just let people know, but to share the value of what they're getting and providing, and why, and the reasons why there is an increase, so that they're like, actually, thanking you, because like, here's the other stuff that we're including, here's the stuff we're working on, and here's where it's going towards.
Yeah. Well, I hate to use maxims and say like that applies for everybody, because there probably are some people who are way undercharging and they just should increase their prices. In our specific use case, I worked a long time on crafting those communications and wording those communications so that they were most easily digestible by our customers. And why does it make you scared? Because we're business owners, and running a business is scary, and change is scary, and you have those fears of you're going to lose your business, and everybody's going to, you raise your prices, but from $15 to $18, and man, like half your customers are going to leave and find somebody else. Then you're going to, what are you going to do? And you're going to be destitute. That's why it's scary. I don't know.
I'm curious. I don't know if you remember what it was, but do you remember the subject line you decided to use when I could see you kind of crafting this? And people always read, see the subject line first. Do you remember the subject line you used when you sent the email out by chance? I
do not, but I know I did not. I don't believe in either the subject line or the very start of the body of the email. I didn't bury the lead. I was upfront. We're raising our prices, and here's what's happening. Here's where they're going, So I think that's one thing in thinking it through, like if you bury the lead, it kind of feels like people are like, wait a second, the whole reason of this email is like down here. And you're kind of like pulling one over on them, trying to like sugarcoat it. And I mean, I did sugarcoat it in a sense, but I just didn't like hide it. Don't bury the lead, because I think people see right through that.
I love to hear, Dodd, what you've learned from any colleagues or mentors kind of in the SaaS space. I don't know if it's someone Rob or someone else you met there, but who are some of your colleagues or mentors and some of the lessons?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you a few things I learned at MicroConf. Does that work?
That's awesome. Yeah.
And one of them is really practical, very, very practical. It's actually paid many times over. This one, maybe 10-minute talk, every MicroConf my business partner and I have been to, like every year, it pays for it many times over. It is research and development tax credit. And I had no clue that software businesses could take advantage of that. And I mean, one of our biggest expenses is our payroll. Developers, and basically you're able to not just get a deduction, you're able to get a tax credit. I mean, it's complicated, but if you have a competent kind of consultant, there's consultants on that type stuff. You can save a lot on taxes. That's a boring thing, but literally it was just like, oh, and I went back and talked to, found like just Googled it, like consultant for research and development tax
Almost
credit.
feels
for
like
software.
free money.
Yeah, it was like just it's like, oh, all of a sudden every year I apply for it and I get it, and it's just like free money, and it pays for the conference over and over and over and over. I mean, that's something I think most like small SaaS businesses don't even like think about, and it's not that hard to get. So I always find tax law interesting. I don't know why. And I like paying my taxes and being honest with them and everything, but that was like a cool thing. Another one was actually as funny because I listened to this whole talk. I think the guy's name is Lars. I can't remember. And his whole talk gave a really long like keynote talk about how to optimize your funnel, having these teams that are doing all this like conversion rate optimization, all this kind of stuff. You have to do it. You have to do it. You have to do it. All this kind of stuff. And man, I remember leaving it almost kind of like depressed a little bit of like, we're not doing that. Like that sounds so, what that he's doing is so complicated. It requires such a huge team. And how much am I missing out by not doing this? How much revenue am I missing out? And then he came out with a blog post, like, I don't know, a year or two later. And he's like, yeah, pretty much everything I just said, kind of forget, I'm not doing that anymore. And I don't think you should be doing it. And it was kind of funny. Like, that's why I said, I don't like giving maxims. I don't like saying you have to do this, you have to do that. I'd rather tell stories, and maybe people can find little nuggets from them that work for them because they know their business better than I do and or ever will. And it was one of those interesting things, like even the experts, even, aren't always right. They don't necessarily know more than you. We're all figuring this out on our own. And it was sort of like, when I read that blog post, I was like, those were the concerns I had. The ones that he was like, here's why we stopped doing it. It was those things in the back of my mind. I was like, well, this is why I think it may not work, or that's maybe not a good idea. But I mean, he's given a keynote speech, and it's like, I feel like I should be doing all this stuff. So you got to kind of do what works for your business, but also like, again, take nuggets. There's probably nuggets in that speech I learned things from and applied, but overall it was learning experience, even just seeing him switch a little bit his thought pattern, and more power to him. A lot of people that give a keynote speech and talk about this whole thing, they're not going to then go in and say, oh yeah, I don't actually recommend doing that anymore because I've learned from it. A lot of people stick to their guns and aren't going to like publicly go out and really what he did helped more people by doing that, because he taught what he learned from his mistakes. It wasn't, I don't think he wasn't being, he didn't have bad intentions when he gave that speech at MicroConf about, conversion rate optimization.
Things are always changing in that universe and world, and people also change their worldview as well. So it totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Any other mentors in the business for you or colleagues that when you need advice on something, you will call?
My dad's an entrepreneur, and he's had a business since the 70s. It's in manufacturing, completely different, but you know what?
What do they manufacture?
Home fragrance products.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, candles, all that kind of stuff. Completely different industry, but every industry has its pros and cons. And every industry has its similarities and differences. And I think sometimes you can learn a lot by talking to people in other industries, and you can get sort of, a little too insulated and just talking to like people in SaaS. And I think when you can get a better time perspective too, by looking at businesses that have been around since the 70s that are in manufacturing. And I know like it's not always like this. When you have a business that's like sustainable, you're going to have bad years, you're going to have good years. And I think that's one of the things with SaaS is it's like, man, if you're not like doing this every year, and a lot of people, because if you have one that's growing and that's working, it is like that for the first X number of years. And I think people think it's always going to be like that. And it doesn't have to be. And you're going to have ups and downs, revenue wise or whatever. And, so just having that time perspective, it also keeps you humble. I was at a conference once, I think it was more power to these guys. And I'm not trying to I don't want to like downplay anybody, but I think it was the guys who started Instagram, when they sold it to Facebook, they were in like their early 20s. And I remember I was at a conference and they were speaking, like it was like right after they had sold it. And I remember thinking, listening to them, I think, and they've probably got a different perspective now because they are older and wiser and all that. And they were obviously they were and are very smart. So no, not trying to diss them in any way, but it was like, I believe their perspective back then is, this is easy. This is how it works. You start this business, you create this technology, you get people on it, you sell it for $1 billion, that's what happens.
That's the recipe. Right? Yeah.
It's like, it's like that's what we're all doing here, And I was like, oh my gosh, that's, but when you can see businesses that have been around for 30 years or whatever, and I'm sure they have a different perspective now, probably not. Maybe I'm reading wrong into what they were saying at that time as well. But because it was also hard back then, early days. So I knew it wasn't always like that is literally hitting the lottery, like building an Instagram. And it was one of the reasons why like I said, we didn't want to build a business from the ground up to be a unicorn. We wanted to have a sustainable, small business.
Is there something that sticks in your mind, Dodd, from either observing your dad or something he told you as a business lesson?
Interesting. Well, gosh, I'm trying to think of anyone. It's hard because if somebody's been your dad for your entire life, to distill it down and think of like one specific thing. I don't know that if I gave you an answer right now, it may be disingenuous because I don't know if I can think about that. It's like a lifetime.
No worries. Yeah. I figured sometimes something jumps out.
I will say, I can tell you another one. I had in high school, one of my friends' dads ran a large commercial construction business. And I did look at him. His name is Jim Sanders. And I looked at him as sort of a mentor as well, because I was always interested in like entrepreneurship and how businesses run. And growing up, our business was actually in our backyard. Basically, it was like across the creek through these woods. And, we basically had the house on the property, essentially. But anyway, this friend's dad, I think he had maybe had a rough week with employees dealing with HR issues. And I remember he put his hand on my shoulder and goes, Dodd, if or when you ever start a business, try to find one that doesn't require a ton of employees.
I think everyone.
And I have a small business, and it's like, you know what? You can hire people that do a good job, and you don't have to micromanage. You don't have a ton of HR issues and all that kind of stuff. And that always like kind of stuck with me. It's kind of funny, but it kind of always stuck with me.
I think a lot of people have some of those days that is the case, but people are the lifeblood as well. So it goes on both sides.
Oh,
of
totally.
That.
I mean, that's why I say that like half in jest,
totally.
And there's tons of businesses that, you have to have a ton of people, and there's tons of people that love managing a ton of people. And that gives them that's like fun and energizing for them. And that's awesome. Yeah.
Dodd, first of all, I have one last question, but thank you. Thanks for sharing some of the lessons and knowledge, some of the journey. Everyone could check out moonclerk.com to learn more and look and see what they're working on there. Last question that I always like to ask this of specifically SaaS founders, which is tech stack. You're a SaaS founder. I'm curious, what stuff do you like to use internally or externally as far as the technology goes?
Yeah, I mean, we're built on Ruby on Rails as kind of the framework. I'm not a developer. My business partner is a developer. I run the business side of things, but I mean, we obviously use Stripe as well as a key part of how we build, as well as building MoonClerk on top of our business. We use, you mentioned Zapier. We use Zapier. That's probably something I more use because it's you don't have to be a developer to use that. we use Intercom for, customer support, help docs. We use Dado as our CMS, Gatsby that's for our marketing site. Probably we use Heroku. They're built on top of AWS. We'll use them for hosting the app. Google Suite for email and that stuff, and Basecamp for our project management, development, intercompany communications, documentation, kind of run the business through Basecamp.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. Dodd, thank you so much. Thanks for what you do. Everyone check out MoonClerk, and we'll see everyone next time. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Jeremy.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I'm feeling like $100 grand.